Wilfred by Ryan Higgins.
Cover of book. A large black furry creature sits among trees with orange leaves. He is as tall as the trees while sitting down. He holds a small boy in a brown jacket, hat, and mittens, who hugs him as they look into each other's eyes and smile. An illustration spans 2 pages. On the left, a gnarled tree grows in front of the silhouette of a far-off town with buildings and some spires of towers. On the right, a large black creature sits on the hill by some small rocks and some small trees bare of leaves. The creature, Wilfred, looks over his shoulder smiling.
Our story begins in a faraway place where there once lived a lonesome giant named Wilfred.
Wilfred, a large black furry creature, is seen from feet to mid-torso while walking. His feet have 3 toes each.
Wilfred was humongous and hairy, and the thing that he wanted most of all in the whole wide world was a friend.
A small town with houses in bright-colored paint and a church with a tall steeple. On the grass and stone path that go through town are a variety of men, women, children, and babies, all of a variety of ages and all of whom are completely bald, except for having small eyebrows. Wilfred's hand can be seen holding onto the birch tree on the left side of the page.
One day, Wilfred came across a little town with little people in it. These little people were very unusual. They didn't have a single hair on their heads. Not even the ladies.
Wilfred tries to hide behind a red barn, but is larger and taller than it and can clearly be seen. Behind him are woods where all the trees are empty of leaves, and in front of him are children, smiling, running, and playing. They are all bald. Wilfred stares out at the children.
In this odd little town, there were little bald children playing. Wilfred wanted to join them.
Wilfred runs over toward the children with his hands up to his face. He is smiling with his mouth open. Children run away from him, some screaming, some with their hands over their heads. One boy in a brown sweater stands and stares up at him with wide eyes.
So he did, and they all ran away.
The little boy is pictured in the top left corner of the page, with his right hand in the air, with one finger pointing up. His eyes are closed and his mouth is open, as if proclaiming an idea. In the center of the page, Wilfred sits on the ground, and the small boy looks up at him.
All except one brave little boy, who said to the big hairy giant, "Sit," and Wilfred did.
Top left. A little boy stands with his hands up over his mouth as he thinks. In the center of the page, Wilfred stands on one foot with one hand up to balance as the little boy looks up at him.
Said the little boy. "Stand on one foot." And Wilfred did.
Left half of the page. The little boy holds a giant golf ball above his head with his right hand and covers his eyes with his left arm. Wilfred is dressed in golf clothes, a cap, short pants, a long-sleeve shirt, a checkered sweater vest, and socks. He has a golf club up behind his head ready to swing. Right half of the page. The little boy dances around as Wilfred plays the ukulele, also dancing.
Play golf. And Wilfred did. Play ukulele. And Wilfred did.
Left half of the page. Wilfred sits on the ground, legs out in front of him. Between his legs is a child-sized school desk, much too small for him, upon which he writes on a small piece of paper. Numbers and incorrect answers float in the air next to him as the boy looks on, concerned with his hands on his hips. 3 + 4 = fish. 9 minus 5 equals 13 over 16. 2 times 2 equals 22. Right half of the page. Wilfred sits atop a giant wooden rocking horse. He is dressed in old-fashioned military clothes, and he has his hands inside his jacket, in an allusion to Napoleon. He and the boy both hold wooden swords up in the air.
Do my math homework. And Wilfred did. Reenact the Battle of Waterloo. And Wilfred did.
An illustration spans over 2 pages. Wilfred and the boy lay on their stomachs in the grass, facing each other with their hands clasped under their chins, smiling.
The little boy and the big hairy giant had so much fun that they decided Wilfred would come back the very next day.
Top left. 2 bald men in town. A man in a purple suit coat points behind him and has his other hand over his mouth. The man in the tan jacket looks at him. Bottom right. A bald man in a green coat holds an oversized pair of scissors. His other hand is behind his back, and he looks guilty.
Meanwhile, the little bald townspeople watched as the big hairy giant lumbered away. They wanted hair too, and with winter coming fast, they wanted it soon. So the little bald people in the little bald town came up with a big and nasty idea.
Wilfred is coming over the hill. He stares wide-eyed at a group of bald men who stare at him. 3 men have large pairs of scissors, and one stands with his hands in his jacket pocket. Their expressions range from amazed to frowning to concerned.
When Wilfred came back the next day, a few of the little bald people stopped him and told him that big hairy monsters were not allowed in their little bald town. If he wanted to visit, he'd have to stop being so big, or to stop being hairy. Since Wilfred couldn't stop being big,
Wilfred sits on the ground, his head down, looking despondent, his hands folded in front of him. Several of the men stand on ladders using large scissors to cut off all of his hair. From the chest up, he is hairless, light purple with brighter purple spots. Piles of his already cut hair lay on the ground around him.
the only thing left for him to do was to stop being hairy. So, the little bald people said he should let them cut off his hair. And Wilfred did.
Wilfred is completely hairless, sitting in a cave next to a fire shivering. Outside, snow can be seen falling. In his cave are his golf hat, a golf ball, a pile of rocks, a welcome mat, and a painting on the wall of Wilfred and the boy that reads Friends.
Without his hair, poor Wilfred was too cold to play with the little boy. Instead, the big hairless giant went back to his cave.
The boy stands in the snow wearing a coat, hat, scarf, and mittens. Next to him is a bag of golf clubs on the left and a pile of snowballs on the right. He holds a stringed instrument in his hand. In the background is the silhouette of the town. The boy stands ankle-deep in snow and frowns, looking out into the distance.
Winter came early, and the snow piled up on the ground while the little boy waited, day after day, for the big hairy giant to return. But Wilfred did not come back. The little boy couldn't understand why.
The boy walks into town. He is pointing with his mouth open in shock at the man who has dark hair. A woman with longer dark hair stands behind him. There are tracks in the snow behind the boy and the couple. A small tree growing in a bucket covered in snow sits in front of the storefront.
Until One afternoon, trudging back into town, he was met with a big, hairy surprise. Some of the little bald people in his little bald town were not bald anymore. They had wigs! When the boy asked where they had gotten all that hair, they replied, "Just from some big hairy monster."
The boy is mid-air as he runs past a group of people and buildings. The people all have dark wigs on and are enjoying the winter weather, playing, making snowballs, and snowmen by colorful houses. The boy looks concerned.
Oh no! Without his hair, the giant would freeze. The little boy had to help him.
The bald little boy is inside a bedroom, cutting his bed sheet into the shape of mittens. Behind him, a window in which snow can be seen falling.
He ran back home, where he made giant mittens out of his blankets.
Top left. The boy sneaks out of his house at night with the giant mittens tucked under his arm. He looks behind his shoulder into the house, which can be seen lit through the door opening, bottom right. The boy holds up the giant mittens as he stands next to a tree in the dark snowy landscape. A path can be seen behind him, where he trudges up the hill. He looks uncertain.
Then, the boy went to find Wilfred.
Top. A sequence of 3 pictures left to right shows a boy standing knee-deep in the snow, holding on to the mittens as the wind fiercely pulls them to the right. Being lifted up in the air as the wind gets trapped by the mittens and he screams. And finally, him flying through the air screaming as the wind carries the mittens away. Bottom right. The boy is seen sobbing and screaming as he stands waist-deep in the pile of snow.
That night, a blizzard rolled in with great blustery gusts and tossed the boy about like a little bald snowflake, and carried away his giant mittens. In the face of disaster and the danger of frostbite, the boy tried to stay calm.
The town can be seen off in the distance on the left as the small outline of people from the town can be seen trudging through the snow. On the right, a large purple spotted lump emerges from the snow with a layer of snow covering it.
The snow fell and the winds blew through the night, and the next morning the town awoke minus one tiny member. The boy was missing. The town sent out a search committee. They looked and they looked and they looked for the little lost boy.
Wilfred lays on his side in the snow, still hairless, light purple with brighter purple spots. He is shivering. In his hands, he gently holds the sleeping little boy, holding him close to his chest to keep him warm.
Until at last they found him, safe and warm. Because in the night, when the boy was lost, he had shouted, "Please save me!" And Wilfred had.
The search committee from the town stands in a group. They all have taken their wigs off and look regretful and sorry. Several look over at Wilfred.
The little townspeople felt sorry. This creature wasn't just a big hairy monster. He was a hero, and he needed their help.
A group of people help push Wilfred into a seated position. He is covered with different colored blankets and holds the boy in his left hand and a giant cup of hot liquid in his right. The boy also has a mug. A fire burns at his feet to help him warm up, and the people from the town have gathered their wigs into piles around Wilfred.
They covered Wilfred in blankets and made a big fire to help him get warm.
A group of 4 people sew the wigs into a single layer of hair that looks like a blanket or a quilt. They smile, and some stick their tongues out as they concentrate.
Then, they took all their wigs and sewed them back together.
3 pictures show a progression of events. Wilfred can be seen hairless, smiling, holding up a suit of his hair that has a zipper in the front. He steps into the suit and pulls it up onto his body.
Into a great big hairy suit for Wilfred to wear.
Wilfred stands up, arms out, smiling wide as he wears the hair suit. He looks down as the little boy holds up a mirror for him to look at himself in.
And that's how Wilfred came to have a zipper, a smile,
Wilfred and the boy sit outside in the grass. It is spring, and small buds and leaves have started to grow on the trees. The two hug and watch as the sun rises behind some far-off mountains. Wilfred looks down at the boy and smiles.
and a very best friend. The end.